Medieval Europe was an era when travel was practically impossible, yet Marco Polo traversed the entire known world, and peasant pilgrims frequently journeyed to Jerusalem. It was an epoch of total isolation, religious intolerance, and a general decline in science. Yet it was during this time that Europeans adopted modern numerals and paper from the Arabs and gunpowder from China. Finally, it was an age of non-national states that is constantly cited in modern debates about nationality. Today, we break down the monumental subject of feudalism, how it worked, where it came from, and why our world today differs so vastly from the world of 500 years ago. In broad terms, feudalism is often imagined as a pyramid, a king at the top, followed by counts and lords, with disenfranchised peasants digging up beets in their fields. In the best-case scenario, the peasant possessed personal freedom. In the worst, they were serfs, essentially slaves. But how did this differ from the slave-owning system of Rome? In reality, feudalism was a radically new, even liberal system that replaced the obsolete institution of slavery. It all began with the crisis of the Roman Empire. In Rome, slaves were objects of the economy, but once imperial expansion stopped, the supply of slaves dried up, the economy stagnated, and cities became overcrowded and corrupt. A mass exodus from cities to the countryside began. As slaves disappeared, their place was taken by free people coloni. Lacking their own land, they entered into a barter agreement with landowners. You give us land and protection, we give you a portion of our food. Thus, the latifundia emerged. When Rome's central authority finally collapsed, emperors allowed these estate owners to handle their own defense. Villas turned into castles, and their owners became proto-feudal lords. It is important to understand that, in the eyes of contemporaries, Rome never truly vanished. Even after the fall of the Western Emperor, barbarian kings continued to mint Roman coins, write in Latin, and revere the Pope. Feudalism became the natural replacement for the Roman order in places where the emperor's authority had evaporated. In Byzantium, however, where the emperor remained strong, classic feudalism never fully took root. In this system, slaves transformed into peasants who worked primarily for themselves but fulfilled obligations to their lord. The nobility formed from Roman and Germanic aristocracy, and later from commoners who earned titles through service. This built the hierarchy of vassalage. However, in this vinaigrette of fiefdoms, the law of the jungle prevailed. If vassals didn't fear the king, they didn't obey him. If peasants saw a lord's weakness, they would rise up against him. Castles were built specifically to defy kings and keep subordinates in check. The situation in Rus was different. Decentralization there was not driven by economics, but by the dynastic divisions of the Rurikids. All princes considered themselves part of a single family and fought for Kiev as a sacred center. In Europe, however, competition was between entirely different dynasties. This intense competition eventually became a primary driver for the development of capitalism. The ultimate antivirus to feudalism was the city. People who had once fled to the countryside began returning to urban centers. Craftsmen and merchants became so wealthy they could dictate terms to lords and popes. Cities gave birth to courts, banks, and police, the very legal systems we know today. Cities could afford mercenary armies and economic sanctions, protecting their lifestyle from the rural serfdom of the surrounding lands. The final core to feudalism was the emergence of nations. Until the 19th century, a nation was an ephemeral concept. People were united by the church. A Bavarian and a Frenchman might not understand each other's speech, but they were both Catholics, and that was enough. National states began to form along the accidental political borders of the late Middle Ages. The nobility became the engine of nationalism, drawing borders and creating literature in national languages instead of Latin. The rise of centralized courts, regular armies, and the concept of a nation that kept people at home brought an end to the feudal order. It took Europe nearly 1,000 years to move through